5, the final day of the How to Encourage Your Husband Without Nagging Him challenge. My name is Tara. If this is the first time we met, I'm a Christian wife, homeschool mom of 10, almost 11 children, and I have grown in God's grace in this area of my life, as I'll be sharing with you today. I've been sharing all week. If you are catching this for the first time this week, I'm going to let you know that you could still enter the giveaway by jumping back, watching the last 4 videos, and they're all like 10, no more than 15 minutes long, and make sure you comment on all of them, even if it's just like, I watched it. That counts. And also catch the action item posts that came out a little later in the day, each day that like complement the video itself and give you something practical to work on. So today at about 1 o'clock, there's going to be the final action item post. So everyone who has commented on both the videos, the 5 videos, and the 5 action item posts are automatically entered into the weekly giveaway. The winner will be announced tomorrow. So I look forward to choosing who that's going to be and giving them their prize. Super fun. Also, if you're catching this in distant future and it is no longer, the 3rd week of September 2021, that's fine. Everything will be saved in the guide section for you to get the good stuff out of this, though the giveaway prize will be. That being said, I encourage you to take notes so that you can get the most out of this and take it from like a nice inspirational idea into something you actually put into your life, because you're here for a reason. Clearly, you want to encourage your husband and not resort to nagging, because this was the most requested item that I do as a challenge for the women in the big family moms from Struggling to Grow in Grace group that I have the pleasure of hosting. So if you're not in that group, that's the only way you'll be able to get the action item posts, so you could actually enter the giveaway. So there's that. There's a link above if you want to check that out. Let's dive into this. Today, we'll be talking about words of life and death. Listen, you probably have heard, the sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. I mean, there's some truth in that statement when I think about it. Yeah, like I've talked about on day 3, we get to actually choose our feelings. We have the autonomy, the freedom as free agents created in the image of God to actually choose our feelings, though we might never have been taught that. It is a choice. I choose to be mad. I choose to, I choose to lash out. I choose to retaliate. And I choose to feel my feelings, actually. So yeah, sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. So even though people might have well-intended or malicious words to say, I choose what I do with that, right? I choose if I take it to heart. I choose if I respond to it. That's my choice. So with all that in mind, it's one thing to be on the receiving end and to kind of rise above, and sort of maybe be charitable with the other person and not think the worst of them or retaliate, pay them back in kind. It takes some maturity, right, to not let those words never hurt me. But it's another matter entirely to be on the giving end of the words, whether, like I said, whether they were well-intentioned or deliberately intended to harm. I've done this more times than I care to admit. I've been very honest all this week because I think, when we're vulnerable with each other, then there's room for real transformation. And that's not necessarily staying in a place of just navel gazing and trashing ourselves, but just enough humility, just enough honesty to make a change, a positive change. Like the biblical language that not a lot of people like, but it is liberating, to repent, which just means to admit it and go the other way by the grace of God. So because I've been here so many times when I've been on the giving end of those hurtful words, mostly through nagging, not necessarily like explosive kind of stuff, because my style tends to be more, I think, like many women, to be totally honest, we may not have as much physical strength, but we sure make up with it with our intellectual caliber. We can put together little zings, loaded statements that are dripping with tone and meaning, that are loaded, like I talked about yesterday, where the sword that just thrusts, right? Rather than the words of the wise that bring healing, like it says in the Proverbs. So I am more the giver than the receiver. And it's kind of hard when you're the giver because our pride can really flare up and we don't want to admit it to ourselves. I've let these proud, rash things come out at me in little sly, kind of contemptuous way, whether it's huffs and puffs and little nags and drags and digs at my husband. And I see the effect. Like sometimes it's honestly, and it's not to my own credit, more often than not, it's a direct hit, right? Because I know him so well. We've known each other since we were 18 years old. We met in high school, got married when we were 23, started having kids when we were 25, and here we are now, almost celebrating 20 years of marriage. Then I can see my beloved husband take that hit and either kind of like just take it, right? Or I can see his frow, the frow, the furrow, and he's just like, and understandably so. In a quieter moment, when I put myself in his shoes, I'm like, oh my gosh, if he had said that to me in that tone of voice, I would have been ticked. I totally would have called him out on it too, right? Like right then and there. Maybe not the most wise way I could have handled it, but I certainly would not have taken it quietly or lying down, because that's just more my temperament, maybe even my vulnerability. So that being said, I don't kill him. My words aren't, actually, drawing blood. There's no visible mark, right? When it comes to the words. We say, oh, sticks and stones will never break my bones. Words, it can't hurt me, right? Yeah, but they can. They can. And as much as, yes, there's a choice in how we take things, I'm talking more to the giver. How do we encourage our husbands instead of, tearing them apart, right? Because the nagging over time, it's just like, it's like it says in the Proverbs, the woman who just tears apart her own house with her bare hands. And it's one piece at a time, right? Brick by brick. And you don't really notice it until things, especially the foundations, start to crumble. So because death by 1,000 cuts can be really effective. And that's not my heart. I have a heart to be married to my husband till death do us part. I embrace the biblical view of marriage, one man, one woman for life. We're building a family together. We're building a generational future for our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. We have shared vision and shared goals, though we might go about it differently in our own complementary roles, with him as husband, me as wife. Like, I have a heart to to do my part, that this is not only going to we're going to last and make it, but we're going to thrive, and our children will see a better example than generations past, and they'll be growing on a better foundation as they come into their adult lives, for those who marry and in all areas of their life. So with that in mind, when I'm like, people ask me, hey, Tara, how can I encourage my husband rather than nagging at him? Because they know the nagging adds up. Where does it go, right? It only tends to add up over time and escalate. Well, got my last golden nugget for the week. We've been building on a foundation, right? So if you haven't seen this, I definitely recommend you jump back, because it all led up to this point and everything kind of builds one after the other. So 2 days of building some foundations. And then I talked about choosing your feelings, the heat of the moment. And here's the final piece. When you recognize that you can choose your own feelings, you recognize your vulnerability in the heat of the moment and sort of the default play-by-play that you tend to, we all have our own ways of handling those situations, and usually they're repetitive. The last piece is then choosing your words. And it's a lot easier to do when you're making a commitment, you've repented before God, you're asking for God's grace, you're making a conscientious effort, not a perfect effort, but you can improve when you make a point to choose your feelings, be aware of the heat of the moment, right? Pull a Jesus, like I talked about yesterday, and now choose your words. So I talk about words of life and death. The scriptures talk a lot about words. I could spend a whole week talking about the power of our words. I'm just going to give you one right now that I think just hits it. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat of its fruit. Whoa, this is one of the most indicting scriptures I've ever been on the receiving end, and said, wow, the power of life and death. Now, obviously, I don't have witchcraft level power to just Hogwarts style, right? And just kind of command someone to die. But I can inflict serious wounds that are akin to a type of killing, right? And that's really serious. God knows. And sometimes I'll even admit it to myself that I was like, that was harsh. I'm just tearing him down instead of building him up. That was really on the negative side rather than the positive side. I was really looking at the worst possible way of him flopping down on the couch at the end of the day while I'm still standing there hot and pregnant, and at a busy time of the day. These are words that I can choose to be constructive or destructive, right? They can encourage or discourage. And honestly, most of it isn't even the choice of words. Apparently, 90% of what humans communicate is nonverbal. That means it's not the words. 10% of what we communicate is the actual selection of the words. That means 90% of communication isn't our words. So words are important. I really care about words, right? Words that are accurate, say what you mean what you say. But here's the deal. Most of it is tone and body language, right? So there's a big difference between the scenario I just described, right? Husband on the couch at the end of the busy day, wife's hot and pregnant and tired or whatever. She's just like, are you serious? I can choose to say, hey, honey, could you give me a hand in the kitchen, or could you give me a hand with the kids, please? I'm just feeling kind of hot and tired. Or I could say, would you give me some help, for crying out loud? Honestly, you do this every day. like pretty much the same words, right? But the tone, like the look on my face, and I didn't have to make this up because I've done this before more times than I care to admit. Or here's another common scenario. I mean, my husband, for those of you who know, he's a handyman by trade. And the irony, I kind of joke about it, but sometimes it gets on my nerves. No, sometimes I choose to let it get on my nerves. Is I'm married to a handyman, and I say, like, can I book an appointment with you so we can get something done at our house? So I might say, like, on one hand, I could say, would you finally get that thing done? It's been 2 months. Hello, what's the point of being married to a handyman if you won't fix your stuff? Or I could say, hey, hun, could you make a note or something to get that thing you said you were going to do done? I'm really looking forward to it. It'll make life so much easier. Boom. Again, I mean, or to make it even shorter, right? I could just be like, would you help me, please? Would you help me, please? Same words, totally different tone. And I mean, you know this stuff is pretty elementary, but sometimes we just need to hear it and be like, yep, that's me. And it's time for me to make a change. I'm going to repent. I'm going to say enough is enough. I'm going the other way. So help me, God. So with all that in mind, I realize that I don't do this for my husband and choose to speak to him in life-giving words because he deserves it. Because sometimes I'm just like, it's not a reward for good behavior. He's not a child or a dog, right? He's a fellow human being and he's my husband. We're equal in the sight of God. And he is like, we are totally allied. We're on the same team. So, people are like, well, Tara, does it mean I never get to talk to him about things he's actually doing wrong and could use correction? Listen, there's a time and a place and a better way to address issues and problems between husbands and wives. Can you hear that? They're in the other room just squealing. Hey, Malachi, a little quieter, please, and close the door. Okay. Thanks. They're having a lot of fun. What was I saying? There's a time and a place to address issues and problems between husbands and wives. That is not the context of this week's challenge, something we talk about another place, another time. And if you want me to, because honestly, how to graciously and effectively address problems and issues between husbands and wives, that's a great topic, and it deserves time to actually go through it. So, how to encourage your husband without nagging him. If that's something you're like, hey, Tara, I have a heart and a desire to speak to my husband with life-giving words, but it's easier said than done. It's possible that there are unresolved issues that are making it, more difficult, and it's kind of uphill and into the wind. And you find yourself playing out these scenes over and over again with words. You're like, I could say it more graciously, but I'm just not. What the heck is wrong with me? There might be some roots. Okay, there might be some stuff that you don't even realize is there, could have nothing to do with your husband at all. So if I can be of assistance to you, I do have one-on-one coaching appointments available, a limited number of them per week. So if you want to check out the link and book a time with me, so it can be a listening ear, can help you, can identify some root issues and make a constructive plan to move forward so that you can encourage your husband and not be resorting to nagging or worse, then I'm happy to be available to you. Listen, you can grow in God's grace. Like I said, I've been married almost 20 years. Oh my gosh, almost 20 years. That's amazing. And I realized that when it comes to the nagging, and that's been my part to play. My husband doesn't nag me, ironically, right? It's the wives who are spoken to. He has his own rules to play, right? And that's another talk for another time. But I know that I've grown in God's word, God's understanding and maturing as a woman of God. It's only been the last couple of years that I've taken this more seriously, taking responsibility for my choices, my feelings, and my words. And that's been huge in being able to encourage my husband rather than nagging him. So I know that I can grow in God's grace, and I know that you can too. So I hope that this challenge has been a blessing to you. I look forward to reading your comments, and I hope you have a great weekend. God bless you wherever you are. I'll see you soon on Monday for our new